Hi there, Jackie Fleischman here, your corporate confidence coach. I work with ambitious professionals to help power up negotiation skills, navigate conflict, and work through really tough interpersonal dynamics that are impacting initiatives or deals that you're working on in your line of work. I usually post one video a week where I share some tips, tactics, and strategies, and this week we are talking about threats, impasse, or call to action. Resorting to threats in a negotiation is one tactic among many in a toolkit full of aggressive options. In its most basic form, a threat communicates the costs of non-compliance if and when certain issues or demands fail to be adopted. Threats tend to lurk in the background of most negotiations, even if never wagered by the parties. None of us like to be on the receiving end of a threat, much less feel pressure to respond or act in a specific way. But when deployed at an appropriate time, under specific or certain circumstances, there are ways to execute or issue threats in a very intelligent manner. You can wager them intelligently, effectively, and with benefit to all parties involved, believe it or not. A well-played threat is not designed to punish the other side. It actually serves to protect your own interests in the face of extremely challenging circumstances. And today we're going to look at an example. I recently had the privilege of working with a startup company that has designed a proprietary algorithmic trading system using artificial intelligence to trade the equities markets. With the assistance of a hedge fund, this startup has been able to prove the strength of its unique approach and system, and the hedge fund has eagerly participated because they are seeking diversification. And the startup wants to partner with them because they're eager to prove out their technology and their system. So it seems like a pretty symbiotic relationship. During a 6-month period, the startup demonstrated promising returns and results, and the hedge fund requested increased capacity. At the same time, the startup is at a stage where it requires investment capital to scale the system for commercial use, to which the hedge fund has expressed reluctance. In other words, the hedge fund wants to put more money in and do more trades, but the startup is saying, I can do that for you, but I need more investment capital so that we can do that effectively. In response, the startup explained that if no investment was forthcoming, it would no longer be able to trade the hedge fund's capital because it would not have the funds to cover operating expenses or increase capacity. In this case, the startup had no choice but to threaten abandoning the hedge fund, resulting in a complete forfeiture of all progress that had been made. It was able to do this successfully because the startup had nothing to lose by walking away and pursuing other alternatives to achieve its growth strategy. As a result, the hedge fund agreed to fund operating expenses for the foreseeable future with a view to raising the investment capital necessary in a few months' time. When leveraged successfully, threats can motivate the other side to take action without being punitive in nature, leaving aside the all or nothing component of a threat. The key is to frame it in a way that highlights the other side's interests by illustrating how non-compliance will thwart the desired outcome. If you find yourself on the receiving end of a threat, consider the context in which it was issued and try to determine the motivations behind it. I can think of 3 personality types that engage regularly in issuing threats as part of an integrated tactic in negotiation. There's 1, the actress. This personality has a need to be heard and acknowledged and will issue threats when feeling frustrated or offended. Is that who is issuing the threat? Really look at your parties at the table and figure out what is going on and what's the motivation. What are people bent out of shape about? The straight shooter, number 2. This personality is no nonsense and usually likes to get straight to the point. This is actually the case with the hedge fund and the startup. He made a very pragmatic decision that served his interests. If they didn't fund his operating expenses, he just wouldn't be able to meet their needs, their capacity, or the diversification that they were seeking. Threats are issued due to real constraints being faced and or existing alternatives to achieve the outcome being sought. Number 3, the poker player. My favorite. This personality is driven by having the upper hand and exerting power. Does this sound like anybody we know in modern day politics? Whether from a place of insecurity or a desire to dominate, threats are wielded without much thought to consequences or regard to relationships, and may be more of a bluff than reality. There's no question that when used effectively, threats do have their place in a negotiation. But before you start issuing counter threats or threats that will likely only escalate tensions, and as you set out to achieve your goals inside a negotiation, consider whether issuing a threat will truly help you achieve your outcomes. In certain situations, it very well may provide gratification, but you really want to avoid locking yourself into a course of action that could be super costly for you in the long run. If you find yourself confronted with a particularly aggressive threat, consider a display of strength, either by reframing the demand or ignoring it altogether by expressing your preference for negotiating at the level of the party's interests. I'm Jackie Fleischman. Thank you for watching this video. If you like these tips, tactics, and strategies, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and there's always more on the website at www.jackiefcoaching.com. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next time.